Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest today is April Henry. April is the author of the forthcoming In the Blood and a best-selling author of YA and adult novels. She is the winner of the Edgar, the Anthony, and the Oregon Book Awards. Welcome, April.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so very much. Let's start with talking about your career trajectory. How did you get to here?
Well, I was a huge reader when I was a kid. I didn't feel like my day was complete unless I had at least one book that I was going to read that day. And when I was probably like in fifth or sixth grade, I started writing and I wrote a short story about a 6-foot tall frog who loves peanut butter. And I decided Roald Dahl would like to see my story. And my dad showed me in the front of a book how it has the publisher's address. He said, why don't you try sending it to him, care of his publisher? So I sent it off and it made its way over to England eventually. And Roald Dahl sent me back a postcard telling me how much he liked my story. And what he didn't say was that he actually took it with him to lunch, showed it to his editor. She had a children's magazine called Puff and Post, and she contacted me and asked if she could publish the story. And so for a while, I was like, oh, I can be a writer when I get older, but I didn't actually meet a real writer until I was 28 or 29. So as I got older, it felt, I was growing up in a little logging town, so it wasn't like there was a lot of writers or anybody that didn't work in a mill running around. But I just thought there was no way that I could be a writer, and I stopped writing by the time I was in high school. And of course, once you stop doing something, that you're never going to be a writer. If you want to be a painter and you're not painting, you're not going to be a painter. So I didn't write again until I was about 30, when I got a book from the library and it was bad. I kept reading it thinking it would probably get better, and it never got any better. And the ending didn't even make sense. The main character was too stupid to live. And I was like, this book was so terrible, and I wasted hours reading it, and I felt angry. And then I picked it up and I saw on the spine, it was published by one of the biggest publishers in New York. And I was like, wait a minute, is that all you need to do to get published is write a bad book? Because I am totally capable of that. So I started writing and I wrote a book and I started sending it out to agents, and I was sure that I would get an agent right away, but I got 107 rejection letters. Started writing a second book. I loved that book. I knew in my heart it was good. And I got 53 more rejection letters. But the 54th lady called me from New York City. She said, I love your book. I want to be your agent. She started sending it out to editors because that's the next step to find an editor to buy it. But we just got really nice rejection letters. Then I wrote a third book and it didn't even get nice rejection letters. Then I wrote a fourth book called Circles of Confusion, and it sold in 2 days in a 2-book deal to HarperCollins. So people were like, oh, you're an overnight success. And I'm like, that overnight success took 8 or 9 years. So I have been writing ever since. And then probably maybe in 2005, I saw a story about overseas boot camps in the New York Times. Actually, I think a bunch of us saw that story because I've seen other books that were clearly inspired by that. Like Todd Strauss, I think, has a book out called Boot Camp. But I was like, it was just so crazy because this kid was walking to school and 2 men pulled over in a white van and they didn't say anything, just got out of the van and threw him struggling into the back of the van. And then he's in the back of the van and there's nothing back there but some mesh between him and the front seats. And he's like, well, obviously these 2 are serial killers and I'm going to die now. But they had been hired by his parents to kidnap him, which was perfectly legal because no kid's going to be like, yeah, I want to go live in a boot camp in Costa Rica for 4 years. So I started writing that. And when I finished it, I thought it was an adult book with a teen main character. And my agent, Wendy Schmaltz, represents a ton of YA authors. And she said, no, you've written a YA book. And that's how it sold. And I realized, man, I like writing for teenagers. And so I kept doing it. And over time, I just stopped writing for adults. And now I only write for teens.
What is your writing process like?
I'm starting a new book now, so I can tell you exactly what it's like. I'll have an idea. Like I don't know if you saw the documentary 3 Identical Strangers. It was a very odd situation where this adoption agency, if they got identical twins, they would split them up and not tell the parents. And so this guy went to college in the late 80s, and people were like, "Oh, David, I thought you weren't coming back." And he's like, "No, my name is Ray. I don't know who you guys are." And they were like, "David, you're so funny." And they were hugging him. He eventually put him in touch with the real David, and it turns out they were identical twins. There was a lot of media coverage, and then it turned out there was a third one. They were identical triplets.
Mm.
And it came out that the adoption agency seemed to be running its own little scientific experiment, which was, what if you took three identical children that have the same genetic makeup and put them in completely different families? So they, as part of the adoption agreement, you had to agree that your child would be studied, but they never told them why. So they would come by and like do tests of intelligence and physical ability. And I thought, what if somebody was doing that now, that they were trying to figure out what's the best way to raise children? And there's a girl being raised kind of in a cult like feeling where they're trying to make the most ideal human being. And there's another one of her in the outside world being raised by in more of a regular situation. So I start brainstorming, I start doing research, I start reading books. So I've been reading books on like cults or I'm probably going to talk to some identical twins. It'd be great if I could find somebody
Mm.
who was separated at birth, but that's probably hard to do. But I know there's been like documentaries and research studies because it's perfect. If you have identical twins raised in different situations, then that a lot of things are controlled and you can just see what it's like. So and then I start thinking about, well, what are the turning points going to be? What's the resolution going to be? And if you do something with identical twins, you know there's going to be a point when each one is dressed as the other and failing to persuade people that they're going to act strangely to the people around them. I mean, people aren't going to buy them 100%, or it's going to be a high wire act to do that. So I kind of research at the same time as I'm writing. I think of like, what are the turning points? And now I have to do the hard part, which is the actual writing. I can't keep just brainstorming anymore. I'm going to start small. I'm going to say, like, okay, you just have to write for 10 minutes without stopping, because
Mm.
otherwise I start picking at it and I start critiquing it and thinking it's not very good. So you need to figure out a way to kick out that voice in your head that will be useful later when you're editing it, but isn't useful when you're writing it.
So you won the Edgar Award. How did that change your career? Or did it?
Well, I've been around for a long time, so that probably, I don't know that that changed it, but it is an award that even people who aren't readers may have heard of, unlike the Anthony or some of the other things. That and the New York Times, because I've been on the Times list. Those are two
Mm.
things that kind of civilians or whatever you want to call them would recognize. I feel like it gave me more of an entree with other writers, and I got to get up and like before I was ever published, I met James Lee Burke and I interviewed him for a literary magazine. I told him that I was trying to get an agent, and he said, "You're a winner, I can tell." And I used to keep that cassette tape in my car, and when I was driving to work, I would rewind it 7 seconds just so I can hear him say, "You're a winner, I can tell." So I got up there and accepted the award and said that James Lee Burke was right. It just took like 30 years. And his daughter, Alfair, who's also a thriller writer, was there. And she came up later and handed me her phone, and she had called her dad, and he was on the line. So
Oh,
he
nice.
congratulated me. So yeah, it was just like a dream day. I've been to the awards before. In 2018, I had a book called The Girl I Used to Be, and they said, and the winner is the girl. And I was half out of my seat. And they said in the blue coat that I had to sit back down. It was Monica Hesse had won for her
Mm.
book. We just happened to have similar titles.
Well, and if someone else happens to win, Monica Hesse, not a bad person to lose out to for
Yes,
sure.
exactly.
Uh, what do you see as the importance of having diverse characters in your books?
It is vital. It's also like, so I'm a white older lady, so I try to vary up my cast as much as possible, not only in terms of race, but of like gay characters, maybe a non-binary character, a trans character. I feel like it's important to have people that come from different backgrounds, like either one's rich, one's poor. And I try for anything that I am not to do as much research as possible. I've written 2 books with a third coming out about a blind girl. And I do so much research to make sure those are accurate because
Mm.
if you're in a minority, it's an insult to read a book where they get things wrong about how something works for you. And then a whole readership is going to think they understand blindness, for example. I don't think I think there's also maybe things that I don't feel like it's my place to write from the main point of view of the main character being like maybe a Hispanic person who grew up with parents that were migrant workers. I don't speak Spanish. I don't think I would ever understand or do that justice. So,
Mm.
but I do feel like you need the secondary characters are more diverse. I mean, I feel comfortable writing from a guy's point of view because I'm just trying to be one guy, but I just want to make sure that I don't get things wrong.
Excellent. So you have a book coming out. Tell us about In the Blood. Where did the idea
All
come from?
right, there's my beautiful
Lovely.
book. Oddly, this girl on the cover looks like a twin to someone I went to high school with. I actually sent her the photo of the cover and was like, "This looks like you." So I was thinking, I've done a lot of genetic genealogy, which is using genealogy to DNA to build your family tree. So, and I found a few secrets. Found a couple of second cousins that were born on the wrong side of the blanket, or whatever they want to call it. Some with a that paternity is not what is on paper. And I thought, what if there was a girl who's adopted? She's always wondered about adoptive parents, and she and her best friend Elle have like spun all these fantasies about what they were like. And when she turns 18, she has an early birthday. I originally was going to make it that she lied, but the people in the DNA community were like, no, let's please make her be the age you could be, which is 18. So her friend gives her an ancestry DNA kit. She sends it off, and then she starts trying to figure out who her parents were. I wanted to make it that it was difficult. So I talked to Leah Larkin, who is a DNA expert who runs something called the DNA Geek blog. And I was like, how can I make it that it's harder? And she said, well, if both parents came from immigrant families, they might not have as many matches in the DNA. She's eventually going to figure out that she is the daughter of this serial killer known as the Portland Phantom. I also read books by people who either grew up and found out their father was a serial killer or were adopted and found out their dad. One was the dad was a serial killer, and another was found out her mom was Diane Downs, who killed her children. So, and then
Wow.
she was pregnant and gave up the baby. The girl went into a tailspin when she realized who her mother was. And I wanted to explore what's nature, what's nurture, which I guess is similar to what I'm going to do in the next book. But what are you born with, and what are you responsible for?
So how have early readers and reviewers responded to In the Blood?
Okay, so I try. Oh, it is so hard. I currently will look at Goodreads every day because it's got probably the highest rating I've ever gotten a book at this point. It's at 4.25, which is really good. And so I will go and look at that. I won't look at the actual reviews underneath. And then the
I know, because that way lies danger for sure.
yes, you get somebody just being mean or something. And then that I've gotten reviews in Booklist and a school library journal and Kirkus. They're all good. And a few of them say because there's a dark side to it, like because she has a good family and good friends. So they were like, the serial killer stuff, is it too much? But then I think it was School Library Journal was like, maybe it's just enough. I tried
Mm.
not to be graphic. And you can get away with so much if you just let the reader fill in the blank. Like I learned that about swearing. If you say he swore, the reader is going to use whatever word they think the character would have used. And maybe you're going to think of a different word when you're 12 than when you're 17. If with violence, you can just cut away from it because people are going to fill it in with what works for them. Like when you watch, I just rewatch the first season of Stranger Things.
Hmm.
Before you can see the monsters very much, they're way more scary. Once I could see them, I'm kind of like, oh, it's like Alien, but mixed with, it stops being, when it was just in my head, it was much scarier. So I use that a lot in books. You don't need to get into a lot of graphic detail. Readers will fill in the blank.
I like that. What are you working on now?
It's that book about that's kind of like Three Identical Strangers
Hmm.
meets Brave New World. And just, I'm hoping to maybe have a finished draft by the beginning of the school year. I do a lot of school
Hmm.
visits, so summer's my fallow period. Although I actually got asked to do to a summer camp. I'm like, a summer camp? That would be cool.
Yeah, it would.
I've never done that. That would be interesting if it works out.
Where is the summer camp at?
It's in Tennessee. So
Oh.
from sixth to ninth grade. So my parents were poor, and the only thing I know about summer camps is from books. I just imagine
Hmm.
what it's like, and I could probably write a whole thing where they go to summer camp, but I would just be stealing all the different things I've read. I've never been to summer camp myself.
What would most people be surprised to learn about your writing or about your books?
I'm actually very cheerful and I never worry about anything. I'm kind of Teflon like. I have looked at autopsy photos while I was eating cookies. It doesn't really affect me. So that might be something surprising. And then some people are surprised that I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in my free time because I'm very much
Hmm.
an outlier. I'm too old and I'm a lady, but I really like it. It's since I work at home, my Jiu-Jitsu partners are like my work buddies. They're
Hmm.
the people who notice you got a new haircut or whatever.
You mentioned doing presentations. Is that something you like to do?
I love to do school visits. It's exhausting. It's a high wire act because if you have 500 kids, then maybe one of them is acting up or something is going on. You have to decide. I was never a teacher, so my desk stare is not very good. I just kind of look more grumpy. But
Hmm.
like, what do I do about this? How do I stare at them and hope that they'll stop? Do I just start looking at the other side of the room? Because some people will actually kind of get a little bit more misbehaving. And then doing so many school visits, I've noticed how different schools are in terms of the resources that kids are given.
Hmm.
Like Iowa is some kind of free choice state now, so your kid can go to any school if it doesn't have to be in their district. If you could drive them there, they can go there. So every year it's like a death spiral. Those schools that are in the inner city and are crumbling and the kids are fighting and they ask if you can yell because the mic hasn't worked for a couple of years, which is something I've been actually asked to do. Then the next year, then the parents are desperately going to figure out how to drive their kid to a better, nicer school with equipment that works. And then you're just left with the even poorer children, or even a more unstable thing. And the quality of education is all over the map. I also speak at private schools sometimes and Title I. So I was at a private school last year where the librarian said she had to explain to the students that not everyone had a private jet. Some people couldn't even afford to fly commercial. And then I'm contrasting that where, like maybe the week before, I was at a school where 90% of the students qualified for free and reduced lunch. And a lot of kids are coming from bad places and are really vulnerable.
Hmm.
So I just try you don't really know what kids are dealing with at home.
Is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
I have to admit, I still really like Roald Dahl, and he was a very complicated figure, and there was some really ugly sides to him. There's a new play out, I guess, with John Lithgow playing Roald Dahl, and channeling some of his horribleness. But he was really nice to me as a kid. So those books speak to me. I still have some old books from my childhood, like Betty Kavanaugh, just because I fell into them and they made me love reading.
Mm.
I still have probably a whole shelf full of books from my childhood, sometimes that I picked up, not necessarily that I had kept, but that I saw them again in a thrift store. And I was like, oh my gosh. When I was a kid, like maybe early teens or preteens, I read this guy named Samuel Stellabarger who wrote these stirring historicals that there was a couple that were made with, oh, who was that famous actor? Ty Powell? No, he had a sword. Anyway, it was a lot of sword stuff. And
Mm.
I just remember that the drama, the books were very dramatic and I loved drama. So some of those still, Prince of Foxes and Captain from Castile. And I'm probably the only person living because those books were very popular in the 40s.
Mm. What are you reading now?
I just finished reading that book. Oh, what is it? Finding My Way Home, Finding Home. It won the Newbery. It's about a girl who's grown up in a cult, and her mother takes her out of the cult, and she really wants to get back. I'm also reading. Have multiple books usually going. I'm reading Ruby Falls by Jen Phillips, which is an adult book. Got 3-starred reviews about these people during the Depression, and there's a falls that underground that is based on a real falls, and it's a tourist attraction. Only it's like a locked room murder, only it's underground in the caverns. And then I have Megan Lally's What We Did to Survive. She writes, she's just new in the thriller world. Her first book became an instant New York Times bestseller. I don't think she realizes that doesn't usually happen for people. So this is her third about a cruise ship gone wrong. And I looked at it today because I'm like, should I try and add that to the pile of other books that I'm reading?
I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. For our listeners and watchers, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And again, thank you so much, April.
Well, thank you.